The story starts in a church where 16-year-olds are about to receive their heavenly professions from the goddess. The priest called over a boy named Levin to step forward. Levin felt nervous about receiving his heavenly profession, and silently prays, hoping that both he and the cute girl beside him would receive good ones. He knelt before the statue of the goddess as he made his request. The priest finished his prayers and asked the goddess to reveal Levin's heavenly profession. Levin kept his eyes shut, waiting anxiously. Suddenly, the priests gasped in shock as they saw the revelation. They whispered among themselves until one of them hurried over to Levin and announced that he had received the sacred beast Tamir profession. Levin's eyes widened in surprise. The girl in the crowd cheered for him, everyone except for one boy standing off to the side. Later, the villagers gathered to say goodbye to Levin, who had become a sacred beast tamer, and Arya, who had become a holy knight. The village lord spoke on behalf of everyone, calling them the village's pride and hope. He reminded them of their duty to serve the country. As the village chief continued reading his speech, he suddenly broke down in tears, overwhelmed with emotion. He was actually Levin's father. He felt incredibly proud that their small village had produced two S-class professionals. Hugging both of them tightly, he thanked them, not just as their lord, but also as a father. Arya insisted that she should thank him instead. She recalled how the village took her in when she was an orphan and treated her like family. Now she was finally able to repay that kindness. Levin's father couldn't hold back his tears. Levin's sister then stepped forward, wanting to say her own goodbye. She reminded Levin and Arya to get along and train hard in the royal capital. Their mother, however, worried about Levin's kindness, fearing it might cause him trouble. Levin's sister reassured her, saying Arya would be there to keep him in check. She then asked Arya to take care of her younger brother and return home safely together. Levin understood what his sister really meant by that, while Arya simply nodded, unaware of the deeper meaning behind her words. Everyone waved goodbye as the carriage moved away. Levin's father grew worried now that the two had left. His sister also looked concerned. His father's worries were about serving the king, which suggested he knew the king personally. On the other hand, Levin's sister was more concerned about Levin and Arya's relationship, something more than friendship but not quite love. They both sighed, hoping the two would stay safe. Arya watched the village fade into the distance with sadness. She wondered if she could do well as a holy knight. Levin noticed her concern and asked if she had seen the new fences in the fields. He also pointed out that the broken windows in the meeting hall and the gaps in the gates had been repaired. Arya hadn't noticed these changes. Levin explained that they were an investment for the country, and in return the country seemed to be supporting their village. As long as they served the kingdom, their home would remain protected. He encouraged her to work hard for everyone's sake. Hearing this, Arya blushed slightly as she imagined being by Levin's side. She agreed to his words and they made it their promise. Levin then fell into deep thought. He hadn't seen Arya smile in a long time. A few years later, people started calling Levin a worthless sacred beast tamer. The king, furious, smashed his wineglass on the floor and demanded an explanation from Levin. In front of him stood a small, dull-looking egg. The king frowned and asked why the egg looked so pathetic. Meanwhile, another boy had a larger egg overflowing with magic power. The king asked who had summoned the small egg. Levin immediately admitted that he had summoned it, confidently saying it was a sacred beast's egg. The boy next to him scoffed and asked if it was just an egg meant for cooking. The leader of the beast tamers, looking uneasy, said he had never seen a sacred beast's egg that small before. The king, now even angrier, threw a bottle and shouted at them to stop joking. He reminded Levin of all the time, money, and effort he had spent on him and demanded if he even understood the cost. After waiting 2 years, the king couldn't believe he had ended up with something so useless. Enraged, he ordered Levin to return all the money wasted on him and kept calling him incompetent and worthless. Now Levin understood why his father had been so worried. Levin tried to ignore the king's selfish outburst. It had been 2 years since he left his hometown. He had just completed his training as a sacred beast tamer, and today was supposed to be the day he summoned his partner, Sacred Beast. But things did not go as expected. The king was furious and called a nearby soldier. He ordered him to destroy the egg, calling it worthless and a nuisance. Levin quickly shielded the egg with his body, refusing to let it be harmed. He insisted that there was life inside and was sure it was a sacred beast, even if it looked small. But the king refused to believe that something so insignificant could be a sacred beast. He ordered the soldier once again to destroy it. The soldier hesitated but could not disobey the king's command. He swung his sword, cutting Levin. Blood dripped onto the floor, but Levin endured the pain. He repeated that the egg was not trash. The king was confused that Levin would go so far to protect it. Frustrated, he decided to handle the matter himself. The large egg nearby began to crack. The king, unable to see because of the bright light, asked what was happening. From inside the egg, a bird-like creature appeared. The boy from earlier felt happy. His partner had finally been born. The other beast tamers were shocked when they saw a real griffin. They shouted that this was the true sacred beast tamer. The boy laughed proudly and told the king to look at his partner, the real sacred beast. But the king's attention was still on Levin. Levin's partner had also been born, a tiny lizard, no bigger than his palm. It looked weak, its whole body shaking as it kept its eyes shut. It let out a faint sound calling for Levin. The king asked if that creature was truly a sacred beast. The soldiers couldn't help but laugh. To the king, it looked like nothing more than a lizard. He turned to the leader of the beast tamers and asked if the creature was really a sacred beast. The leader, flustered, admitted that it did look like a lizard to him as well. The king couldn't believe he had spent his gold on what seemed to be just a lizard. He laughed for a moment before pointing his sword at Levin. Then he ordered him to leave the country, saying Levin had no place there anymore and must never return. Levin panicked. If he was banished, his village would suffer. Desperate, he begged the king to reconsider, promising to raise his sacred beast with honor. His promise to Arya was on the line. The king went to Argus, the other sacred beast tamer. He praised Argus and called the griffin impressive. Argus thanked the king and promised to serve him well. The king was pleased to hear that. Then Argus brought up the king's promise about Arya. Levin felt confused when he suddenly heard her name. The king thought for a moment and then officially approved the marriage between Argus and Arya. Levin couldn't believe it. He had just remembered how his childhood sweetheart had recently invited him to a private dinner. Argus smirked as he watched Levin being pulled away, and just like that, Levin lost everything. Levin was taken out of the country in a carriage. When he reached the border, it finally sank in. He had truly been banished. He had endured 2 years of harsh training only to lose everything. His role, his hometown, and the people he cared about. The only thing left was his small lizard companion. As he sat there, he wondered what to do next. The lizard seemed to sense his feelings and suddenly jumped onto his head, smacking him repeatedly. Levin guessed it was hungry too. He gently assured the lizard that he was fine and promised to protect it. The carriage soon came to a stop. The knight who had escorted him, the same one who had slashed his back, handed him a rucksack. With a sad expression, the knight said it was all he could do for him. He told Levin to take care of himself. Levin simply smiled, then turned and walked into the forest. 3 days passed quickly as Levin moved through the forest. His partner, a lizard he had named Elfie, ran ahead as if leading the way. One rainy night, Levin stayed in a cave and prepared dinner. Elfie, hungry and impatient, waited nearby. Levin checked if the meat was cooked and told Elfie to wait a little longer. Soon, a simple steak was ready and they celebrated. He felt relieved that he could cook despite the rain and thanked Elfie for leading him to shelter. After giving Elfie its share, he asked if the food tasted good. The lizard looked happy. Levin had once worried that Elfie didn't eat insects like other lizards. He hoped it would grow strong. Levin checked his luggage. Thanks to the soldier, he had what he needed to survive in the forest. He then opened a map and studied it carefully. His biggest concern was where to go after leaving the forest. If he kept going in the same direction, he would reach the kingdom of Cronia. As he stared at the map, his eyes landed on his village. He wondered how everyone there was doing. He wanted to go back, but he wasn't allowed to. The guilt of not fulfilling his duty weighed heavily on him. More than anything, he wished he could take Elfie to his hometown at least once. Thinking about home reminded him of Arya. The promise he made to her could never be kept. Feeling exhausted, he placed the map on the ground and closed his eyes. Before long, he drifted off to sleep, while Elfie sat silently watching him. Morning came and the rain had stopped. Levin woke up with a stiff neck. Sleeping on the ground had been uncomfortable, but he was relieved to have survived another day in the forest. As he tried to get up to prepare breakfast, he noticed a little girl sleeping on his lap. He froze, staring at her in confusion. Panic set in as he wondered where she had come from. He was sure he hadn't done anything, and the sight of her wings only made him more uneasy. Suddenly, the girl mumbled in her sleep, calling out for her mother. A moment later, she woke up. Levin panicked even more when she looked at him and called him Mama. She asked what was wrong, then innocently wondered what was for breakfast. Levin was briefly distracted by how cute she was, but his mind quickly returned to the bigger issue. Was he really her mother? The girl kept asking for breakfast, but Levin had never seen her before in his life. Then, she excitedly said she wanted rabbit meat again, just like the day before. Those words triggered a memory, Elfie happily eating rabbit meat. Realization hit him. This little girl was Elfie. She had actually grown up, just as he had wished. Levin cooked breakfast and Elfie enjoyed the food, saying it tasted just as good as she expected. Embarrassed, Levin told her to stop calling him Mama, but Elfie insisted, saying he was her mama since he was the one who called out to her. Levin argued that his Elfie was just a small lizard, but Elfie quickly denied it. She explained that she was a sacred beast who could change between a dragon and a human. Hearing this, Levin finally realized that he had truly summoned a real sacred beast. Elfie told him she had been waiting all this time for someone to call her, and she sincerely thanked him. Levin felt like crying. He was relieved that he had fulfilled his role. He thought about returning to the kingdom, but then he hesitated. Was it really a good idea to go back to a place where people saw him as worthless? Elfie noticed his silence and asked if he was okay. Levin reassured her that he was fine. After their meal, Elfie told Levin it was time to go and eagerly grabbed his hand. She said she wanted to head in a certain direction inside a cave and urged Levin to hurry. Seeing her excitement, Levin realized that even in her human form, Elfie hadn't changed at all. Soon they arrived at a dark and eerie-looking cave. Elfie led the way, and as they walked deeper inside, Levin was shocked by what he saw. A massive door stood before them, covered in vines. He tried to ask what it was, but before he could finish, Elfie moved toward it. Confused, Levin asked how she planned to open it. Without answering, Elfie began chanting a spell and magic energy flowed from her hand. The gemstone in the center of the door started glowing and slowly the door creaked open. Levin wanted to ask Elfie for an explanation, but before he could, his attention shifted to what lay beyond the door. In the middle of the cave stood a gigantic dragon, frozen in place. Staring in awe, Levin couldn't help but exclaim how huge it was. That's what she said. Anyway, Levin wondered if the dragon was even alive. Elfie looked at it with a sad expression. Feeling anxious, Levin asked about the place they were in. Elfie then said it had been a long time and told the dragon that she had finally returned. At that moment, Levin realized that Elfie had wanted to come here from the beginning. Elfie then asked Levin to crouch down a bit. When he did, she suddenly lifted him in her arms like a princess. Levin became flustered and confused, quickly asking her to wait, but Elfie had something to show him first and told him to hold on tight. Levin tried to protest, but before he could finish, Elfie took off into the air with ease. Levin was shocked. Elfie could fly. She reassured him that he wouldn't fall because she had him. Then she told him to open his eyes. Slowly, Levin did as she said. His eyes widened in surprise when he saw something on the dragon's back. A ruined city stretched across it, leaving him utterly confused. Elfie confirmed what he was seeing and introduced the place as Lindworm, the continental dragon. She explained that this was where their kind, the Divine Dragon Clan, returned to. Levin gazed at the ruined city in silence. He remembered reading about it somewhere. The Divine Dragon Clan once ruled the skies, using their great intelligence and magic to protect the people. However, their downfall came when they fought against the Mazoku, led by the Overlord. Now, they existed only in legends. At that moment, Levin realized that Elfie was one of the Divine Dragon Clan. When he mentioned it, Elfie confirmed the truth. Levin could already imagine the greedy king changing his attitude if he found out that the so-called lizard was actually a divine dragon. Levin then remarked that the divine dragons should have been wiped out. Elfie denied it, saying that while many were gone, some might have survived. Her sad tone made Levin fall silent. She shared that long ago Lindworm was full of life. Creatures of all kinds lived there and beautiful flowers bloomed everywhere. But as her magic faded, the city and its residents fell into a deep sleep. From her words, Levin realized how lonely Elfie had been all this time. He wondered how long the city's residents had been waiting. Even though all he could see were ruins, he imagined Lindworm as a place full of beauty and life. He said it was just a feeling, but his words made Elfie's expression brighten. Levin wished he could have seen Elfie's hometown with his own eyes. Elfie was glad. She remembered everything. How Levin had protected her when she was newly born, how he had been banished from the kingdom because of it, and the happiness on his face when they first met. She also recalled the delicious meals he made for her. To her, Levin wasn't just her master. He was like a parent to her. Levin was shocked by her confession. He thought he had already lost everything, his job, his family, and his loved ones. But now, Elfie was right beside him. He grabbed her shoulders and promised to take care of her. His parental instincts kicked in and he started crying. However, to do that, he needed to get his life together first. Find a job and a place to live. Elfie then mentioned that there was a house nearby. She said it would be great if they built a home together on Lindworm, the continental dragon. Levin was too stunned to respond. She added that she wanted a big house. But Levin, worried, told her that the city was not in a livable condition. Elfie agreed that it was in ruins, but insisted that wouldn't be a problem. She suggested that he form a contract with Lindworm and rebuild the town on its back. Her words left Levin so confused that even his art style changed. He then turned to look at the massive dragon towering before him. He wondered if he could form a contract with such a huge dragon. He was deeply worried because of their many differences. The other party was a living legend and he had nothing to offer in return. He might even offend Lindworm and end up burned by its fire breath. Elfie assured him that he could do it and form a contract with Lindworm. Levin asked how she could be so sure. She reminded him that he was a sacred beast tamer. Levin agreed but still doubted his own ability. Elfie then explained that a heavenly profession was a role given by the goddess, something not just anyone could have. Levin was chosen because of who he was, and she believed there was a reason behind it. Levin felt anxious as he remembered being called trash and banished from his own country. But he told himself to stay strong. He couldn't keep thinking like this forever. He decided to give it a try. Elfie believed in him, so he had to believe in himself too. He had to trust that he could form a contract with Lindworm. When Levin saw Lindworm, his nerves grew. A contract was a way to strengthen the bond between humans and beasts. He knew how it worked. After all, he had trained for 3 years. A contract could be formed by feeding the beast, caring for them, or forcing them into submission through power and fear. But with the huge Lindworm, none of those methods seemed possible. Then, Elfie's voice snapped him out of his thoughts. She cheered for him, and for now, that was enough. Levin took a deep breath and looked at Lindworm again. He was still new to being a sacred beast tamer and didn't have much confidence in himself. He wasn't even sure he could succeed. But he had made a promise to build a big house and take care of Elfie properly. For that reason, he refused to back down. Even though Levin lacked confidence, he shouted the word contract. The barrier magic surrounding Lindworm started to crack and fall apart like fragile glass. Then it exploded in a bright flash of light. Levin covered his eyes as he felt blinded. Elfie gazed at Lindworm with a sorrowful expression. Slowly, Lindworm moved his claws and opened his eyes. When he saw Elfie, he called her Princess and said he was glad to see her again. He told her he had been waiting for her for a long time. Elfie simply replied that she had returned. As Levin slowly regained his eyesight, he asked what had just happened. He was shocked when he noticed Lindworm glaring at him. Elfie congratulated Levin, saying the contract with Lindworm was complete. Levin stood frozen in surprise. With respect, Lindworm addressed Levin. He explained that although he had been asleep, he was aware of everything that had happened. He then declared that Levin, the sacred beast tamer, was now his new master whom he would serve. Only then did Levin fully realize that he had formed a contract with a magical beast that could understand human language and communicate. More importantly, he had just become the master of a massive dragon. A sense of pride filled him and he respectfully bowed to Lindworm. Lindworm chuckled at the gesture. Levin, relieved that he hadn't been burned alive, couldn't help but feel incredibly lucky. Elfie walked up to Lindworm and told him she wanted to live on his back. Lindworm was happy to hear that. He stretched for a moment before telling Levin and Elfie that it was time to leave. Elfie asked if he was okay moving around after just waking up. Lindworm agreed that his strength might have weakened from his long sleep, but assured her that he still had enough power to fly. Levin, confused, asked what he meant. Lindworm then said he would make an exit for them. He gathered flames in his mouth and the cave started shaking. Levin panicked as the ground trembled. Elfie quickly picked him up and told him to hold on tight. Levin urged her to leave the cave immediately. Feeling uneasy, he asked Lindworm what was going on. Lindworm looked up at the cave's ceiling and unleashed a powerful fire beam. The blast shot through the ground above, reaching all the way to the sky. Elfie and Levin quickly ran out of the cave and stared at the massive hole left behind. When Elfie saw the open sky, she felt happy, but her mother was still trembling in fear. She then called out to Levin. Levin snapped back to reality, realizing he was still alive. A wave of relief washed over him. Lindworm let out a small laugh and asked if he had done well. Then he took off, soaring through the sky. Still shaken, Levin struggled to believe that such power came from someone who had just awakened from a long sleep. He was in awe. Lindworm was just as surprised and amazed at how much his magic had grown. He credited his newfound strength to his contract formed with Levin. He also pointed out that Levin had an incredible amount of magic within him. Because of that, the revival of the Divine Dragon Clan could now become a reality. With a sincere voice, Lindworm thanked Levin and officially welcomed him to their continent. Elfie landed on Lindworm's back with Levin in her arms. Levin finally saw Elfie's homeland up close. Elfie told him this would be their new home and welcomed him. Hearing those words reminded Levin of Arya, who used to welcome him home and show him the vegetables she harvested. It had been a long time since he heard those words, making him feel a bit embarrassed. He said he was back and suggested they start building their lives in the city. He also reminded Elfie that they needed to find a place to stay first. Elfie got excited and asked if Levin remembered their promise. Levin recalled it was about building a big house and told Elfie to leave it to him. However, everything around them was just rubble. Levin spotted some intact bricks and told Elfie they could build their home by gathering usable materials. He said they would need strong wood for the pillars. He quickly found a piece of wood but struggled to lift it on his own. Elfie looked confused about what Levin was doing. After a while, he gave up and apologized, saying they might have to camp out for a while. Elfie asked about the house, and Levin admitted it was impossible to build one from scratch in just a day. Confused, Elfie said it wouldn't take a day. She then grabbed Levin's hand and led him somewhere, saying she would teach him how to build a house. Levin asked if she really knew how, but Elfie told him to just follow her for now. The two arrived at a massive tree standing tall in the middle of the city. Elfie explained that it was the sacred tree which was used to control Lindworm's weather and temperature. She mentioned that the Divine Dragon Clan's power was on another level, and if she remembered correctly, something should be nearby. Elfie then dove into the nearby bushes and shouted that she had found what she was looking for. Levin peeked through the bushes and saw a stone pillar wrapped in vines with a crystal on top. When Levin asked what it was, Elfie said it was something they could use to build a house. Levin doubted her words, but Elfie excitedly told him to try it and made him touch the crystal with his hand. The crystal glowed brightly, and a window screen appeared out of thin air, revealing the Lindworm City management system. Levin stood there, confused, as words appeared before him. A woman's hologram suddenly appeared, greeting Levin as her master. She introduced herself as the Administration Bureau and asked Levin to input his commands. Levin was shocked by the hologram's beauty. The woman then told him to check the available options, which included building a small house and a small farm. Elfie looked proud and explained that in Lindworm, they could use magic to create various things. However, the options were currently limited. Since Levin had formed a contract with her, the available options would expand over time. She suggested that he build a house for now. Levin wasn't paying attention, so Elfie glared at him. Snapping back to reality, Levin began praising the Divine Dragon clan. Elfie urged him to get started. Levin then touched the buttons on the window interface. Elfie wanted a big house, and Levin promised to do his best. Even though the Divine Dragons were known as a legendary tribe, he doubted they could build houses this easily. Hesitantly, he pressed the button to create a small house and awkwardly asked the admin system as he did so. A light appeared from the crystal and flowed toward an open space, forming a house. Levin was surprised and confused, unsure of what was happening. He panicked, trying to hold the hologram and wondering what to do next. Elfie excitedly said she wanted a place with a better view and a bigger house. Levin, frustrated, swung his arms around, causing the house's hologram to shift. After a while, he started to understand how it worked. The hologram woman explained that Levin only needed to say the word construction once he had picked a spot. Levin considered building the house near a clean water source, but Elfie quickly appeared and said she found a nice spot by the lake. Levin liked the idea but reminded her that the rest of the area was full of rubble. Elfie eventually agreed to build it near the sacred tree. Levin was shocked to hear that, but Elfie casually told him they could just clear the rubble later. Levin then activated construction, and a small house appeared out of thin air, landing with a loud thud on the spot he had chosen. Even though it was called a small house, it was larger than Levin expected, leaving him surprised. Elfie was thrilled to see their new home and thanked Levin for it. Levin felt relieved, but as he relaxed, exhaustion finally caught up with him. It had been a long day since morning, and he was amazed by how advanced the Divine Dragon's technology was. Still, he felt that with this, he and Elfie might be able to manage somehow. Levin flinched when Elfie called him over and said she was hungry. She told him she wanted to eat meat. Levin reminded her that they had already finished the last of the meat this morning as soup. Elfie was shocked and started repeating her request for meat like a broken machine. Levin couldn't do anything about it, but he thought the Lindworm management system might help. When he asked, the hologram woman confirmed that it wasn't possible since the city was currently low on mana. Because of that, many functions were restricted. Levin saw that only houses and a small farm could be built, and food wasn't an option yet. Elfie grew frustrated and threw a tantrum demanding meat. Levin understood how she felt. He looked around, but there were no wild animals in sight. Elfie mentioned that they used to raise animals before. Levin also couldn't see any fish in the water. He thought about buying food, but there weren't any shops nearby. Elfie suggested going to the surface, saying her flying ability would get them there quickly. Levin realized that was an option, but felt uneasy about Elfie's "in no time" remark. Before he could question it, Elfie, already excited, grabbed Levin without hesitation. Levin had a bad feeling about it. Then Elfie shot down toward the surface like a missile. Meanwhile, in Elwyn Kingdom, the king discussed strategies to defeat the enemy nation of Cronia and secure victory for their army. The king asked the Holy Knight and Sacred Paladin, Arya, to present her proposal. With empty, emotionless eyes, Arya suggested poisoning the enemy's river. The other soldiers were shocked, but the king seemed interested in her plan. In the kingdom of Cronia, the marketplace bustled with people. Elfie stood in front of the meat stalls, drooling at the sight of the skewers. A shop owner kindly offered her some, and Elfie excitedly called out for her mama. Levin felt embarrassed and hoped she would stop calling for her mama in public. They were currently in Cronia, an enemy nation of the Elwyn Kingdom, under Lindworm's territory. Being in Cronia made Levin nervous, but he hoped nothing would happen as long as he kept a low profile. Just in case trouble arose, he was confident they could escape into the skies, relying on Elfie for the plan. Suddenly, a girl approached and asked what they were doing. Levin was startled by her sudden appearance. She smiled and asked if they were looking for something. Levin admitted he was searching for a place to buy food in bulk. Hearing that, the girl offered to guide them. She led them to a stall packed with various goods, where a tanned, short-haired woman cheerfully welcomed them. After hearing Levin wanted to buy in bulk, she asked if his business was doing well and whether he needed enough for a few days or a week. Feeling anxious, Levin requested a month's worth of supplies. The woman was shocked and asked if he was planning to live in the mountains. Levin simply explained that they were traveling. When the woman asked if he and Elfie were siblings, Levin casually agreed. The woman assumed there was a story behind two siblings traveling together. Levin couldn't exactly tell her that there was indeed a complicated story. The woman smiled, saying they must have gone through a lot together, and generously offered a discount, encouraging Levin to buy as much as he needed. A few minutes later, Levin bought a lot of food, enough to keep him and Elfie fed for a while. Elfie was already drooling at the sight of it. After paying, Levin noticed that he received too much change. The shop owner reminded him about the discount she had mentioned, but Levin insisted on paying the regular price. The woman told him not to worry about it and asked him to buy from her store again instead. She introduced herself as Mercedes, a traveling merchant who planned to stay in Shilin Village for a while. The girl with the puka buns from earlier was Karen, who was from Kronia. Levin introduced himself and Elfie, who made the girls squeal with her adorable expression. After that, Levin and Elfie decided to head home, and the merchants invited them to come back soon. Once they got home, Elfie cheered in excitement. Levin, out of breath, asked her to slow down next time. Elfie agreed, but her growling stomach made it clear that she was just hungry. Levin understood. Levin gathered some twigs and lit them with a small flame. He hung a pot over the fire, relieved to find enough dried branches nearby, though he knew he'd need to stock up on proper firewood later. He then checked the ingredients Karen had picked, a mix of vegetables and Kronian fruits. He decided to cook a specific dish using them. Levin cut the chicken meat with the skin still on. He noticed how thick and firm it was, realizing that the meat's quality matched its high price. He decided to splurge a little this time for his daughter's sake. After cutting the meat, Levin seasoned it with the herbs and pepper that Karen had picked out. He lightly coated the pan with cooking oil and placed the chicken in it. Meanwhile, Elfie was napping when the delicious smell woke her up. She jumped out of bed, drooling, and ran outside, calling for her mama. She found Levin casually flipping the chicken in the pan. He could tell it was cooking nicely. Elfie's excitement grew as she watched, but Levin told her to wait since they still needed to let the meat steam for a bit. While waiting, Levin mixed flour, butter, lemon, and milk in the pan to make a sauce. He asked Elfie to bring out the plates and suggested they eat inside since it was a special occasion. Elfie quickly followed his instructions like a good daughter. Levin cut the cooked chicken into pieces and poured the sauce over it. Elfie's mouth watered at the sight of the finished dish. Lemon cream chicken sauté. Levin warned her to eat slowly since it was hot, but Elfie didn't listen and shoved the steaming meat into her mouth. She froze for a moment, savoring the juicy, delicious taste before commenting on how good it was. Levin felt relieved that she liked it. It had been a while since Levin last made this dish. As he picked up a piece of meat, he remembered how his family used to enjoy it on rare occasions. Arya would prepare the vegetable salad and they would all eat together as a family. But now, Arya was married to Argus by the king's order. Levin wondered how she was doing. Elfie noticed his sad expression and asked if he was okay. Assuming he was tired, she offered him some apples. Levin said he was fine and explained that he was just thinking about Lumiere Village. Elfie asked if it was his hometown and Levin confirmed it. He admitted he hadn't visited in years and was a bit worried. Still, knowing that Arya was doing well in the Knight's Order gave him some comfort. Elfie then asked if Arya was his lover. Levin was surprised at first but calmly described Arya as his childhood friend. When Elfie asked what a childhood friend was, Levin explained that it was like family. Elfie suddenly went quiet, thinking about something related to family. She finished her meal quickly, even eating her vegetables, which made her look proud. Levin was surprised since he thought Elfie was only interested in meat. However, Elfie confidently stated that she would eat anything as long as her mama cooked it. Levin called her a good kid. He wasn't sure what the Divine Dragon tribe typically ate and worried that Elfie might need 100 kilos of meat every day. So far, though, she seemed fine with a regular human diet. Then Elfie asked if there was more meat, which caught Levin off guard. In the end, the 1-month supply of meat was completely gone in just a week. It turns out a divine dragon's stomach was like a bottomless pit, something a certain beast tamer had already figured out. Levin and Elfie visited Shilin Village for the second time. Levin grew worried about running out of money and wondered if it might be better to start a self-sufficient life. As they walked through the village, Elfie noticed that the meat stall was closed. Levin thought it might be their day off, but as he looked around, he realized that most of the shops were closed and the village was unusually quiet. The strange atmosphere made him feel uneasy. Levin then spotted Mercedes and felt relieved to see her shop still open. Mercedes seemed surprised to see them and asked if they were all right, leaving Levin confused by her question. Just then, Karen appeared and exclaimed that another field had been ruined. Mercedes began cursing the Elwinians in frustration. Curious, Levin asked what had happened. Karen explained that the Elwyn army had suddenly invaded and poisoned Kronia's water supply. Levin struggled to believe what he was hearing. Mercedes then suggested that Kronia Fortress had likely fallen. Levin, shocked, recalled that the fortress was considered an impenetrable stronghold and asked how it could have fallen. Karen mentioned the nickname Silver Devil and shared that her childhood friend, a knight of Kronia, had told her about it. The commander of the Elwyn army was a holy knight, a girl with a silver shield, who managed to bring down Kronia Fortress in a single night. From the description, Levin immediately suspected who it might be. He remembered Arya nervously wondering if she could truly become a proper holy knight. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. Elfie gave him a worried look as Levin asked the girls to tell him more about the story. Levin hoped it wasn't Arya. He asked what kind of holy knight the girl was, her name, and her appearance. Karen apologized, saying she didn't know much. She admitted it was frightening to think that such a demon existed. Still, she felt reassured, believing that the Knights of Cronia had already defeated the Silver Devil. Somehow hearing that made Levin feel uneasy. Mercedes then mentioned Eris, a very strong knight. Even though she was young, she dedicated her life to protecting the kingdom. Mercedes patted Elfie's head and assured her there was nothing to worry about. The girls smiled, but Levin still looked troubled. Mercedes then asked if they were shopping and what they planned to buy. Elfie excitedly mentioned meat. They finished their shopping late in the afternoon. Elfie was thrilled about eating meat again. She told Levin she wanted to have teriyaki, sweet potato soup, and an apple for dessert. Levin walked absent-mindedly, still bothered by the thought that the Holy Knight from Elwyn might have been defeated. He remembered how S-ranked Holy Knights inspired their allies in battle with accurate tactics and commands, often turning the tide of a fight. He thought about how S-ranked knights fought to protect their homeland, and wondered if he would have fought alongside Arya if he had stayed. He recalled their promise to always be together. Frustrated, Levin clenched his fist, feeling like he had made up his mind. He then turned to Elfie and asked her to take him somewhere. Even though he was exiled and had no right to worry about Arya or interfere, he couldn't stand idly by. Elfie already knew that Levin wanted to go to Marley Castle. She remembered how Levin had said that childhood friends were like family, and she agreed it was natural to worry about family. Excited, she told Levin they should go together right away. Levin was surprised by her eagerness and thanked her. However, Elfie insisted on having a meat party when they got back home. Levin had no choice but to agree. Elfie then asked Levin to hold on to her back. Feeling awkward, Levin held on as Elfie spread her wings and transformed into her dragon form. Levin was shocked and tried to ask what was happening, but Elfie simply said they would be faster this way. When Levin stayed quiet, Elfie asked if something was wrong. Levin admitted that her back was surprisingly comfortable, soft and stable, without any dizziness from the rapid speed or G-forces. He complained that Elfie never told him they could travel this way. Elfie claimed she had mentioned it before, but Levin didn't remember. Meanwhile, at the castle, two girls were gasping for air in the middle of an exhausting duel. Arya was already at her limit and decided to retreat. Elfie and Levin flew over the thick forest on their way to the castle. Elfie mentioned that they were getting close, but Levin could barely hear her because of the wind. Suddenly, Elfie stopped when she noticed someone lying on the ground and told Levin about it. She warned that leaving an injured person in a forest full of dangerous monsters would be risky. They flew down and found a girl groaning in pain. Levin asked if she was okay and if she could hear him. The girl tried to sit up, and Levin felt relieved that she was still conscious, though she was trembling badly. He told her to stay still and asked what had happened. The girl began mumbling that she didn't want to fight anymore. Then she suddenly coughed up blood, which splattered onto a nearby blade. She said she had successfully defended the castle and repelled the Holy Knight. Hearing this made Levin realize that the girl was a knight. Moments later, she collapsed and lost consciousness. Levin caught her and told Elfie to take the girl to Lindworm. Elfie gave him a sharp look and asked if he wasn't going to the castle. Levin knew from the girl's words that Arya wouldn't be there anymore. The two then flew back to Lindworm. In Elwyn Kingdom's royal library, the chief tamer, Gideon, had a sword pointed at his neck by someone named Rex. Rex had missed the stab on purpose and claimed it was just a coincidence seeing Gideon there. He said he had also come to do some research. Rex then picked up a book that Gideon had planned to burn and asked what was written in it. Gideon pretended not to know. Rex decided to read it aloud. The book was addressed to someone destined to become an exceptional holy beast tamer. It stated that a member of the royal family from the Divine Dragon tribe would be born. The newborn Divine Dragon would appear very small, resembling a lizard. Rex had always found it strange, but in the end, Levin had succeeded in summoning a Divine Dragon. He called out to Gideon, who was trying to sneak out of the library, and said that their country had just lost something valuable. He insisted that this matter needed to be reported to the king immediately. Gideon begged him not to do that. Rex, looking worried, wondered where Levin had gone after being exiled. Later, on the back of the continental dragon Lindworm, far from the surface, Levin worked to become self-sufficient by building a small field for farming. Although the system called it small, the field looked quite large. From the smell alone, Levin could tell that the soil was real and had the right depth. Elfie came out of the house and mentioned that the girl was still sleeping. It was the night girl who had collapsed in the forest, and she hadn't woken up since they brought her to Lindworm. Levin remembered her saying something about defeating the Holy Knight. He had many questions for her, but for now, he decided to let her rest. Elfie agreed. Elfie then noticed that the field was finished, but Levin said they still needed to till the soil properly. Elfie offered to help. Levin eagerly announced the start of Lindworm's development. After some time, Levin decided to stop for the day. However, they had only managed to work on a small corner of the field, which Elfie pointed out. Levin admitted that they couldn't handle it alone unless they had more help. Elfie agreed and mentioned how they used to farm with many others in the past. Sacred beasts and magic beasts working together. Levin was impressed. He remembered that he had some contracted magic beasts, but he was exiled before he could let them prove their worth. Still, he felt it would be disrespectful to summon them just for farm work. Levin suggested taking a break and having some snacks. While starting a fire, he mentioned how Lindworm City was always sunny and wondered if it ever rained. Elfie explained that the sacred tree controlled the weather and temperature, ensuring it would eventually rain at the right time. Levin was surprised to hear that. Elfie also pointed out that Lindworm was currently in spring mode. Now that she mentioned it, Levin realized the weather did feel calm. Levin struggled to start a fire despite the constant sparks from the flintstones. Suddenly, a large flame burst out, burning him and making him back away. Elfie ran toward him but then noticed something inside the flames. She quickly shielded her mother. Meanwhile, Levin was more concerned about the meat getting overcooked. He also spotted something emerging from the fire. A creature with fangs appeared from the flames and called out for its master. It took the form of a beast and leapt into Levin's arms, saying it had been a while. Elfie was confused. The three sat down to talk and the beast apologized for the sudden visit. It introduced itself as Louis, the Crimson Leo, the first fire magic beast Levin had ever contracted with during his training days. Levin never expected to meet him again like this. However, he didn't remember using any summoning magic and asked how Louis had managed to come to Lindworm. Louis tried to speak but stopped midway, then laughed and said he just kept trying until he made it. Levin doubted that was even possible. Louis admitted he wasn't sure himself. He explained that he had been worried about Levin and kept thinking about how he wanted to help him as soon as possible. Suddenly, he was surrounded by light. Elfie then asked if Louis knew about Levin's exile, and Louis confirmed it. He erupted in flames, shouting that he hated the king, calling him fat and greedy, someone they shouldn't serve. Elfie silently agreed with him. Louis shared that everyone felt Levin's emotions when he was exiled. It was painful, heartbreaking, and hard to bear. They were frustrated that they couldn't do anything for their master. Louis said he wanted to be like Elfie, who was currently useful to Levin. Elfie admired Louis's loyalty. Louis then asked Levin to let him help since he would do anything for his sake. Levin agreed and thanked him. Elfie looked forward to working together. A reliable companion had joined Lindworm City. That night, Levin prepared a big dinner. Both Elfie and Louis couldn't stop drooling over the tasty-looking dishes. Levin said that wasn't everything and pulled out a stone oven pizza topped with vegetables and cheese. Elfie asked what pizza was, and Levin explained it was all thanks to Louis. Earlier, Louis had made himself smaller and offered to help with the fire. Levin initially refused since he didn't think a flame beast should use its fire for cooking, but Louis breathed fire on the stone oven anyway. Thanks to Louis's flames, the pizza's flavor and aroma became richer, and the steady high heat ensured it cooked perfectly. Levin realized Louis was the best cooking partner. Louis was just happy to be useful to his master. Elfie hugged Louis and praised him, enjoying his soft fur. Levin found the moment heartwarming. Elfie then said she wanted to hear about Louis's story and how they met. Levin decided to tell the story while they ate. After dinner, they cleaned up the plates and Elfie and Louis quickly fell asleep. Levin smiled at them. It had been a lively meal after a long time, and he was glad that Elfie and Louis got along so quickly. Then, Levin glanced toward a certain room's door, worried that the girl they had rescued still hadn't woken up. Eris was trapped in a nightmare. She remembered her father calling her a fool after she received the Dark Knight job. Everyone said she would never be able to marry anyone. Soon after, Eris was sent to the Border Guard Knights, where a lord welcomed her. However, he pitied her for receiving the legendary Dark Knight job. Known to be the strongest but also cursed, the Dark Knight's power came at the cost of her own life, allowing her to unleash incredible combat strength. When the border was under attack, the lord ordered Eris to fight. It was supposed to be her last mission, defeat the Silver Demon and then retire to marry the lord. Somehow, Arya managed to retreat and Eris thought it was finally over. But she had burned through too much of her lifespan. As she fell unconscious, she thought it didn't matter anymore, she just wanted to disappear. Eris woke up to find a magic beast's face right in front of her. Louis quickly called out to Levin, saying that the girl had finally woken up. Eris felt confused when someone greeted her and asked how she was feeling. She was surprised to realize she was still alive. She noticed a pleasant smell, and when Levin told her to wait a moment, she glanced out the window and saw that they were above the clouds. For a moment she wondered if she was in heaven. Levin soon returned with a bowl of porridge. Eris hesitated, unsure if she should eat food from a stranger, but her growling stomach made the decision for her. Levin told her to take her time eating. Eris figured it didn't matter anymore since she probably wouldn't last long anyway. As soon as she tasted the porridge, her face lit up. Levin asked how it was, saying he had read that it should be good for the body. Suddenly, tears streamed down Eris's face as she told Levin that the porridge was delicious. She remembered how her mother would make her a magic soup whenever she was sick, promising it would help her feel better. All Eris ever wanted was to live peacefully, surrounded by a warm and loving family. She recalled how her mother used to take her to see the flowers once she recovered, but now those dreams felt hopeless. Levin asked if she was okay. Eris then admitted that she was a dark knight. She explained that she had fought many battles at the cost of her own life and would soon die. Angrily, she demanded to know why Levin even bothered saving her. She kept asking why until she passed out again. Levin helped Eris lie back down and noticed that she was sweating heavily. Elfie confirmed that Eris had used up a lot of life force and was in a very dangerous state. Levin then realized that a fierce battle had taken place at Marley Castle, and he assumed the opponent had been the Holy Knight, Arya. Eris was breathing heavily. Levin remembered Mercedes mentioning a powerful knight named Eris who risked her life to protect the kingdom. He wondered if the people around Eris knew about her role and kept forcing her to use her powers. Elfie called them cruel and said she couldn't leave Eris like this. Louis, in tears, asked Levin if he could do something to help. Levin wondered if he could try doing something for the curse that Eris had. Eris woke up and grabbed Levin's hand. Half asleep, she mumbled about how her mother's hand had become bigger. The room fell silent until Levin, clearly flustered, struggled to respond. Eris kept calling him her mother and started throwing a tantrum, demanding the same porridge from earlier and asking to be fed. Levin, still flustered, told her to stay in bed, but Eris kept insisting on the porridge. Elfie returned with the reheated porridge. When Levin tried to give it to Eris, he warned her that it was hot, but instead of taking it, she opened her mouth like a child. Levin realized he was in a tough spot. He asked her to stay conscious, but Eris kept acting like a child. Levin wondered if this was some kind of regression to infancy. Elfie offered to feed Eris, but Eris refused. Levin anxiously told her to eat so she could get better. Eris then asked if she would be praised if she ate. When Levin said yes, Eris called him a liar, claiming that her father had never praised her even once. Levin was stunned that her father was being brought up now. With a sad expression, Eris said she had fought hard because her father ordered her to fight to be useful to the country. She asked to be praised and wondered how long she needed to keep trying. Levin watched her with concern as Eris began crying, asking what to do since she was going to die sooner or later. She continued crying until she grew tired and fell asleep, dreaming about her mother. Levin saw that the war between the two countries was still not over. If the deserter was captured by the army, Eris would likely be used again. He didn't want to see her fight to the death again. He wondered if there was a way to break the curse. However, the Dark Knight was an S-class job, and breaking its curse wouldn't be easy unless a being blessed by the goddess was involved. Suddenly, Levin realized something, and his sudden movement woke up Elfie. She asked what was wrong. Levin said he might be able to save Eris. Without wasting time, the two hurried off. It might have been selfish, but if there was anything he could do, Levin was determined to do it. They soon arrived near a body of water that looked polluted. They landed beside it, and Elfie warned Levin that the area was dangerous because of the poison. Levin recalled that the Elwyn army had spread the poison. He also remembered hearing about someone who always stayed in contaminated places. There was a rumor in Sheelan village about a two-horned beast living in the poison lake. Levin believed that might be the key to breaking the curse. A horse-like creature with two long horns appeared. Elfie asked what it was, and Levin said it was the impure holy beast, Bicorn. Elfie thought about attacking the Bicorn, but Levin quickly stopped her. The horn of a Bicorn had the power to break curses, and with Elfie's help, they could defeat it and take the horn. However, Levin didn't want to do that since he was a holy beast tamer. Levin faced the Bicorn as it started growling. He calmly told it that everything was all right. He understood that the lake was poisoned and wouldn't approach carelessly. He also knew that Bicorns disliked impurities, which they absorbed and purified to protect humans. Levin realized the Bicorn had been in the lake to protect the villagers, and he thanked it for its help. Then he explained that there was someone he wanted to save. Bowing his head, he asked the Bicorn to form a contract with him and lend him its strength. The atmosphere around the Bicorn suddenly felt warmer. Meanwhile, in Lindworm, Eris woke up and screamed in embarrassment as she remembered what had happened earlier. She couldn't believe she had done something so embarrassing. Louis appeared after hearing her scream and asked if she was feeling better. Eris got excited when she saw something fluffy in front of her. Louis was relieved that Eris had regained consciousness since he had been worried after seeing what happened earlier. Eris sat up and stared at Louis for a moment before he rested his head on her thighs. She thought he looked cute and started stroking his soft fur. It had been a long time since she felt such warmth, and for a moment she wondered if she was in heaven. Louis chuckled and told her she wasn't. Then he turned serious and asked if she wanted to step outside for a bit. Eris finally realized they were above the clouds and asked where they were. It really felt like heaven this time. Louis explained that they were on the back of the continental dragon Lindworm. Eris was confused and shocked. Louis said the dragon was under a contract with his master. When Eris asked about his master, Louis said it was a long story. For now, he explained that both his master and Eris had been exiled from the country they once served, and had finally ended up here. Eris felt different because she had simply run away. Louis noticed her troubled expression and told her it was okay to run away. He said that if Eris wanted to stay in Lindworm, it could be her home. Eris wondered where she truly belonged. She wished she had been born into a normal family, surrounded by warmth and peace. She wanted to live as an ordinary girl, not as a knight. She longed to start over in a peaceful place, but her body was reaching its limit. Just then Levin and Elfie returned. Levin looked awkward as Elfie carried him like a princess. Eris tried to ask about their situation, but Elfie answered first, saying it was easier to stay in this form since her dragon form used too much energy. Levin asked Eris to forget what she had just seen. More importantly, Levin said he had something to discuss with Eris. He told her there was a chance to break the Dark Knight's curse and asked if she wanted to try. Eris was left speechless. Eris asked how that could be possible. Levin said it could be done using the power of a sacred beast. He then called over Edel, the bicorn from earlier. As Edel walked toward them, Eris prepared to fight but realized she didn't have her sword. Levin told her not to be afraid since Adele was a sacred beast under a contract with him. Adele then asked if she was Eris and said it was nice to meet her. Eris was surprised by Adele's beautiful feminine voice. Levin asked Adele if she could help. Adele confirmed that Eris's divine job was draining her life force. Eris was shocked that Adele could tell. Levin then realized that Eris's life force hadn't completely disappeared yet, which Adele confirmed. Adele explained that her power could purify curses, essentially reversing them. If she used that power, they could restore Eris's lost life force. Hearing this, Eris couldn't believe she had a chance to live longer. She thought she would spend her remaining years as the wife of the ugly, fat lord. Eris asked what she should do next. Edel told her to use the power of the Dark Knight, and at that moment he would reverse the curse and restore her life force. Levin noticed that Eris seemed uncertain and worried about failing. Elfie took Eris's hand and assured her that she could sense the flow of life force and could feel that Eris's was stable. Elfie told Levin that she would step in if Eris's condition became dangerous. Levin felt more at ease knowing Elfie was helping. He then asked Eris what she wanted to do. He promised to protect her and suggested giving it a try. If there was a chance for her to start over, Eris decided she wouldn't hesitate anymore and agreed to try. The group soon found an open area where Levin explained the plan again. First, Louis would attack Eris. Second, Eris would defend using the power of the Dark Knight. Finally, Edel would reverse the curse and restore Eris's life force, freeing her from the Dark Knight's influence. Eris nervously asked if Louis would be the only one attacking. She mentioned that she was used to fighting human armies and hordes of monsters, but she struggled with the idea of fighting someone as cute as Louis. Edel stepped in and explained that a greater force could help restore even more life force. Levin decided to seek additional help, and Louis immediately understood what his master meant. Ever since Louis mentioned that others could sense Levin's inner feelings, this was Levin's chance to call them. Levin summoned more beasts, and a crack appeared in the air. 3 Valkyrie sisters emerged, spreading their wings in response to Levin's call. They remarked that it had been a while since they were last summoned. Eris was shocked. Edel explained that the 3 were Valkyries, divine beasts known as messengers of the gods. She was amazed that Levin could summon them. Elfie felt proud of her mother. Levin apologized for suddenly summoning them and said he had a favor to ask. The eldest sister said they were already aware of the situation and could use their powers for Eris's sake. The middle sister wondered if Eris could handle it if they gave it their all. The youngest sister complained about how eager the other 2 were to help. The eldest replied that it was only natural to support their master. The youngest said that wasn't what she meant, pointing out how they had been ignored for so long and were now being asked for help. The middle sister noted that even if the youngest was complaining, she was probably the happiest among them right now. The eldest wondered if that was true, but the youngest denied it as strongly as she could. Levin then called out to them and apologized for making them worry all this time. He thanked them for answering his summon and said he was really happy to see them again. The youngest eventually agreed but asked for some stew later as a reward. Levin promised to treat her. He then asked Eris if she was okay with it. Elfie returned with Eris's sword in hand. Levin told Eris that she could give it her all with the firepower coming her way. Eris agreed, but in her mind, she questioned how she had ended up in this situation, and wondered what would happen to her. She gripped her sword tightly, telling herself to make up her mind. Taking a defensive stance, she resolved to face whatever came her way. The Valkyrie sisters chanted a powerful spell and unleashed it. Louis covered himself in flames as he charged toward Eris. In response, Eris drew on her strength as a Dark Knight and blocked the divine beast's attacks, realizing how strong their firepower was. Dark thoughts clouded Eris's mind. She heard the fat, ugly lord's voice talking about making her his wife. He had also mentioned that Eris would die young and beautiful, unlike others. As Eris's Dark Knight powers grew stronger, the curse began to weaken. A bright light flashed, blinding Levin. Meanwhile, Elfie kept checking on Eris's condition. Edel absorbed the remaining impurities, fully lifting Eris's curse. When the smoke cleared, Eris emerged with a pair of pure white wings. Despite Eris appearing in a new form, Levin still couldn't see clearly because of the lingering smoke. He wondered if Eris and everyone else were safe. As he tried to focus, he noticed a silhouette and heard a sound. Eris ran toward him and hugged him tightly, leaving him flustered. Eris excitedly shared that her body felt lighter now. For some reason, she was acting like Elfie, which she found amazing. She wondered if it was all a dream. Levin told her to calm down and asked about her new outfit. That's when Eris realized she was wearing new armor. Elfie then ran over and happily announced that they had succeeded. With a touch, Elfie confirmed that the curse was finally gone and congratulated Eris. Eris thanked Elfie for helping her. Levin asked if it was truly over, and Edel confirmed it. She said Eris had regained the vitality she once lost and finally awakened her power as a Dark Knight. The Valkyrie sisters also confirmed that Eris had completely nullified their attacks. Levin thanked them for their hard work. Eris focused on everyone and thanked them for their help. Levin also expressed his gratitude to the Valkyrie sisters for their support. The youngest sister complained about how tired she was since it had been a long time since she had used that much energy. She then clung to Levin, reminding him of their promise and asking if he expected them to work for free. Levin knew she was talking about a stew filled with chicken and large chunks of vegetables. Seeing this scene, Eris looked confused and asked if Levin was really a sacred beast tamer. Levin asked why she was suddenly questioning it. Eris explained that most tamers were usually arrogant and rude, but Levin was unusually close to his summoned beasts. Levin wondered if Kronia was doing well and thought the same about Elwyn. He then said that he simply wanted to make everyone happy since he had come this far. He advised her not to base her decisions on her role or race, but to choose how to live her life. Eris was left speechless and blushed. Levin admitted that it was all thanks to Elfie that he was able to live on a dragon's back like this. Levin asked Eris if she had any food preferences. He said the porridge from before was just for recovery, but he wanted to know what kind of food Eris liked since he was in charge of cooking and needed to know everyone's tastes. Eris misunderstood the question, thinking it meant something deeper, and became flustered. Levin paused, realizing he had messed up. He apologized for assuming Eris had decided to stay with them permanently in Lindworm. He didn't even realize that he sounded like he was proposing. Eris said she wanted to eat a hamburger. She also shyly asked him to drop the formality since they were close in age and would be comrades from now on. She thanked Levin for bringing her in and for everything he had done. Though she admitted she might be inexperienced, she asked Levin to take care of her. They sealed the agreement with a handshake. Adel agreed that living in such a place sounded nice and asked if she could join too. The two eldest Valkyries also decided to stay so they could protect their master. They jokingly asked the youngest if she had any problem with that. Embarrassed, the youngest asked if they would all be living under the same roof. Levin laughed and said he would build houses for them. The youngest Valkyrie then started hitting Levin, who didn't seem to understand why. Elfie giggled, feeling excited that more people were joining them. Levin agreed that things were about to get lively. Watching the scene unfold, Levin hoped he could also bring Arya into their group. Meanwhile, in the Elwyn Kingdom, Arya was ordered to attack Kronia again. The general commander mentioned that Kronia hadn't made any moves since the attack on Marley Castle, and if they were going to strike, now was the perfect time. Arya hesitated and reminded him that many of their soldiers were still recovering from the last attack, so launching another invasion would be a bad decision. The general commander scoffed at her and reminded her of her duty. He told her to use her power as a holy knight to motivate the soldiers, saying that would help them push through the pain and keep fighting. He insisted that a few injuries were nothing to worry about. Arya argued that forcing injured soldiers to fight would only cause long-term problems. The commander laughed and asked if she was trying to lecture him about humanity. He then reminded her that she was the one who suggested poisoning Kronia's water supply. Arya clarified that it was only a strategic suggestion, but despite objections from others, the king decided to go through with it. The commander told her not to run from her responsibility and reminded her that her role was to follow orders. He stressed that the king had commanded them to invade, no matter the cost. Arya stayed silent. The commander ordered her to prepare for another attack and warned her not to disappoint him. Arya watched as the commander-general walked away. She remembered how she had been doing the same tasks since joining the Knight Order. Her loyalty to the king whom she served was the source of a Holy Knight's power. This power appeared through her will to carry out the king's wishes, even when it involved cruel strategies she didn't agree with. When she mentioned the poisoning, it was as if she wasn't herself. Arya trembled, wondering if it was right to continue doing terrible things, especially things she didn't want Levin to see. But she couldn't go against the king without losing her power. She also worried about the village of Lumiere and realized that Levin was working hard for the kingdom as a beast tamer. Just then Argus showed up saying he had been looking everywhere for her. Look at this bastard blushing like an idiot. Argus heard that Arya would be fighting Cronia again. Arya remembered that Argus was the same beast tamer as Levin and had spoken to him several times during meetings. She wondered why Argus was here. He didn't seem like a bad person to her, but she found him too pushy. For now, she decided to handle him casually. She explained that she would bring some wyvern knights with her. Argus then offered the griffin he had summoned to assist her. Arya thanked him for the offer but said it would only expand their tactics. She then excused herself, saying she needed to make preparations. Argus suddenly shared some surprising news. Their marriage had been officially decided. Arya froze in shock and stopped hearing anything Argus was saying about them being a suitable couple since they were both S-rank job holders. She insisted that she wasn't worthy and wasn't interested in getting married yet. Argus simply laughed and reminded her that it was already official. He then showed her a dagger, the loyalty dagger, which was dedicated to the king. Argus claimed that the king had approved their marriage and that it was considered a royal decree, leaving Arya with no right to refuse. Argus then pinned Arya against the wall and held the dagger close to her face, telling her that she now belonged to him. However, he was only teasing her and said he hoped they would see each other more often in the future. He called her his bride before leaving, reminding her to talk about the details later. Arya slumped to the floor, feeling defeated. Everyone had a hard time calming down Argus's griffin. The chains weren't enough to hold it, so they decided to use tranquilizers. They told Argus to move back because it was getting dangerous. Argus shouted at them and told them to hurry, but the other beast tamers just called him useless. Argus reminded them he could hear everything they said. In his mind, Argus wondered why his beast never listened to him. His griffin, named Eternal Sky, always tried to escape and caused trouble almost every day. He couldn't understand why it acted that way if he was supposed to be its master. He also thought about how little time was left before the second attack on Cronia. If things kept going like this, he wouldn't be able to accomplish anything. Suddenly, someone clapped and joked about how Argus's partner had so much energy. He pointed out how a beast tamer couldn't even control his own beast. Everyone turned and saw Drake from the Langland Duke family, along with another S-ranked person from a different field. People compared him to Argus and said Drake had a stronger presence. Argus angrily asked what Drake wanted. Drake told him not to glare and said he had a plan to help tame the griffin. Argus was surprised and didn't say anything for a moment. Then he told Drake that Eternal Sky was his sacred beast and he would handle it himself. Drake asked if Argus even had enough time left and wondered what would happen if he failed in front of everyone. He said the king might get angry and cancel Argus's engagement to Arya. Argus told him to be quiet and said he was acting too confident. Drake just smiled and said he was always like that. Deep down, Argus agreed a little, but he's still worried about what would happen to his griffin. Meanwhile, far away at the continental dragon Lindworm, Levin was shocked. Everything on his farm was already ready to harvest. The youngest Valkyrie proudly said it was easy for them. Levin still found it strange because only a week had passed since he planted the seeds. The youngest Valkyrie explained that this was what their powers were for. Sapphire, the second oldest, had water magic and used a skill called Blessing of Gentle Rain. Topaz, the youngest, had light magic and used a skill called Sunshine. When they used their powers together, the plants grew faster. Levin finally understood why the crops had grown so quickly, but it still seemed unbelievable. Still, he smiled and thanked them for their help. Elfie happily said her mom would be proud. At the same time, the eldest Valkyrie and Louis stood quietly. They said sorry for not being able to help because their fire powers weren't useful for farming. Levin told them not to worry and asked them to help with the harvest instead. Louis used his sharp claws to cut the crops, while the eldest Valkyrie used her strength to carry the heavy bundles of wheat. They told Levin to leave the hard work to them. Levin felt thankful and proud to have such dependable teammates. Then he invited everyone to harvest together. Everyone finished harvesting the wheat and Levin brought the grains to the city to be turned into flour. Elfie asked what he planned to do with it. Levin said he already decided to make something for everyone to enjoy. The Valkyrie sisters looked forward to it. Louis asked if he could help, so Levin told him to heat up the stone oven. This time, Levin's cooking was simple. He just mixed the ingredients and put them in the oven to bake. He remembered the last time he made this treat for the Valkyries. They really liked it. Soon, Louis said the oven was ready, so Levin placed a tray of dough inside. While the scones were baking, Levin opened a bottle. The delicious smell spread through the air. Topaz immediately guessed what Levin was making just by the scent. Then Levin returned and showed them the snack. They were scones made with wheat grown right there in Lindworm. The Valkyrie sisters said it had been a while since they had Levin's scones. Levin proudly told them there were toppings too. He picked different ones for each of them, based on what they liked. Topaz said he got everything right. Elfie, however, complained she didn't see her share. Then Levin brought out a whole tower of scones just for her. Elfie thanked her mom for the food, even though Levin made it. The others laughed, seeing how much Levin acted like a caring parent. He had made a lot on purpose, knowing Elfie would complain if it wasn't enough. So the girls enjoyed their afternoon snack peacefully. Later on, Elfie said she was full and Eris smiled, happy for her. Levin thanked everyone for helping with the harvest. Elfie also wanted to say thanks. She stood up, put her hands together, and thanked them for giving their strength to Lindworm. Eris said they had saved her life, so she at least wanted to repay them. Watching Elfie speak, it was easy to forget she was the princess of the Divine Dragon clan. There were rumors that her kind had been wiped out during the war with the demons. It was surprising that someone like Levin had summoned her. Even Levin said he was just as shocked. He also complained that Lindworm was huge, and the technology there was so advanced it felt like cheating. It was amazing, and a little scary. Topaz asked what he meant by advanced technology. Levin explained that Lindworm had something called the city management system. Just then, a figure appeared behind him. It was the system showing up as a hologram, asking if Levin had called. Levin had forgotten he was still carrying the magic tool that activated it. The system congratulated Levin because the city's rank had increased. Levin noticed it went up a bit thanks to more people living there and a rise in stored mana. Because of this, a new tool had been unlocked, a refrigerator. Levin asked what it was. Then a refrigerator appeared out of nowhere. Eris wondered if it was a kind of storage device. Levin opened the door and a cold wind came out. Since Levin didn't understand it right away, Elfie explained. It was an ancient magic tool that used ice magic. In short, it could keep food cold and fresh for a long time. It had both cooling and freezing functions and also a special spell that slowed down how fast food spoiled. Levin asked if that meant they could keep food fresh longer, and Elfie said yes. Levin was excited. Now he could buy more ingredients like vegetables and meat and store them safely. That meant he could cook more types of meals. He celebrated, saying he would now make even more delicious food for everyone. The Valkyries looked at each other and started to wonder if the goddess had made a mistake. Levin was supposed to be a divine beast Tamir, but he was acting more like an S-ranked chef. The next day in Sheelan village, Levin asked Elfie and Eris to help with the shopping. He went to buy vegetables and meat, while Elfie and Eris looked for seasonings. They planned to meet up later. To keep Eris from being noticed on the streets, Elfie called her Big Sister instead of using her real name. The night before, Eris had insisted on going with them. Now that her curse was gone, she wanted to visit new places. Since Sheelan was a small village, no one there should have known who she really was. Elfie supported the idea of bringing Eris and even promised to protect her if anything happened. Levin didn't argue, but he asked Eris to wear a disguise just in case. Even with the disguise, Eris still felt nervous walking outside. Elfie told her not to worry and stayed close to her. In serious moments like this, Elfie seemed very reliable. Along the way, they found a meat stand and Elfie bought a snack. They sat on a bench while she ate. As they walked through the village, they overheard some people talking about a rumor. Elfie and Eris listened closely. The rumor made Eris very uneasy and she started to sweat from worry. Later, they met up with Levin again. He had just gotten a big discount for buying in bulk. When he saw their troubled faces, he asked what had happened. Elfie explained that they heard a troubling rumor. It said that Elwyn was planning another attack on Cronia, taking advantage of Eris's absence. Levin believed this was exactly the kind of plan the king would come up with, and he was sure Arya would be leading the charge. Eris felt guilty for running away from her duties. Elfie tried to snap her out of it and told her not to blame herself, but Eris still looked worried. Levin stayed quiet for a moment, then asked Eris what she planned to do next. He understood how strong her sense of duty was, since her father and someone named Julian had trained her to be that way. Remembering those hard times, Eris said she understood, but Levin asked her to think again about what she really wanted. He wanted her to say it clearly. After hesitating, Eris finally shared her true feelings. She said she didn't care about being a noble. All she wanted was to live peacefully in Lindworm with Levin and the others. Both Levin and Elfie were moved by her words. Levin then made a decision. He said Eris should still go to Marley Castle, but not to fight. Eris was surprised and said she didn't want to go back there, but Levin explained that she needed to face the people who had used her and tell them she wouldn't follow their orders anymore. He told her to hand in her resignation and finally take control of her own life. The next day, Eris had a funny-looking face because of the strong wind pressure while riding on Elfie, who had turned into a dragon. Levin asked if she was okay, but Eris couldn't hear him at all. Suddenly, Elfie stopped flying and confirmed that Marley Castle was under attack. The Elwyn army, along with some mages and golems, was trying to break the magic barrier protecting the castle. Eris said things were going badly. Levin asked again if her commander was named Julian. If the Elwyn army defeated Julian and took the castle, the rest of the enemy troops would move in. That meant their main goal was to protect Julian. Levin then told Elfie to fly into the castle. As they flew over the Elwyn army, Levin looked down and wondered if Arya was among them. Just then, Eris spotted Julian. He and a few soldiers were already being chased and attacked by the enemy. Julian looked scared and was quickly surrounded. He tried to fight back, but he couldn't even pull out his fancy sword. The enemy soldiers were shocked that a commander would run away and leave his troops behind. They called him a coward. Right before one of the enemy soldiers could finish him off, a sword suddenly hit the ground nearby. The soldiers were confused and didn't know where it came from. Then Eris landed, grabbed the sword, and swung it with force. A shockwave burst out, knocking the enemies back. The enemy soldiers had no choice but to retreat for now. Levin and Elfie landed soon after and asked if Eris was okay. She said she made it just in time and then stared coldly at Julian. The nobleman was speechless when he saw Eris alive. Two soldiers ran up to check on him, but Julian yelled at them and blamed them for almost letting him die. At that moment, one of the men noticed Eris. Eris looked nervous as she called the man her father. Without warning, he slapped her. He couldn't believe she came back after being gone for so long. When Eris tried to speak, her father interrupted and angrily asked if she had no pride as a knight. Eris stayed silent for a moment, then shouted that she didn't have any pride at all. Her father was shocked. Julian, confused, tried to ask what she meant, but Eris shouted at him to be quiet. She said she only came back to quit being a knight and that she would no longer follow her father's wishes. She said all she wanted was to be happy. Her father seemed surprised by her words. Eris said she didn't need a noble's pride or status anymore. But her father disagreed. He said everything he did was for her future, so she could marry someone powerful, become a respected knight, and find happiness that way. Levin stepped in and asked the father if he was serious. He couldn't believe the man was ignoring his daughter's feelings and called him selfish. Levin questioned whether the father's plans would really make Eris happy. He explained that Eris had almost died because of the pressure to succeed as a knight. Eris's father was shocked and asked what Levin meant. Levin was confused too, but then started to explain how Eris's power worked. He said that during her last mission, Eris had been pushed into a dangerous fight. She used up a lot of her life energy and that's why she ran away. Eris's father turned to Julian and asked for an explanation, since this didn't match what they had discussed earlier. Julian insisted he wasn't wrong. He blamed Eris for using her power by herself and said he never wanted things to turn out like this. He also reminded everyone that he was her fiancé and had always looked after her. Eris said Julian was hopeless, but she didn't want innocent people to get hurt, so she decided to stop the Elwyn army's attack and protect Cronia. She also said this would be her last mission as a knight. After that, she wanted to quit the knighthood and cancel her engagement to Julian. Julian couldn't believe what he was hearing. He shouted that he wouldn't allow her to resign or end their engagement. Eris asked if he even understood what was happening. She told him the Marley castle was about to fall and there was no time to argue. Julian lost his temper and grabbed Eris. He angrily told her to stop being ridiculous. He couldn't believe a lower-ranked noble was giving him orders. He claimed Eris wouldn't survive without him and had no place to go. He insisted she had no choice but to become his wife, and told her to return to the castle to fight for him. Just then, Levin grabbed Julian's arm and glared at him. He said Julian was the one with nowhere to go because Eris already had a place where she belonged. Julian, confused and angry, pushed Levin's hand away and called him a commoner, but Levin stood his ground and raised his hand toward the sky. Julian tried to drag Eris away again, ordering her to destroy the Elwyn army. Eris asked if that meant he was accepting her terms, but Julian didn't answer. At that moment, a shadow appeared above them. Julian looked up and saw a huge dragon flying overhead, staring straight at him. He started sweating and shaking in fear. Levin introduced the dragon as Lindworm, the continental dragon, and said it was his partner. Levin then said there was no point in staying any longer since no one would listen to Eris. He invited her to return home to Lindworm. Julian tried to stop them. Suddenly, the Elwyn soldiers arrived. They said their target was the bigger guy, hinting that it was Julian. Seeing so many soldiers, Levin asked Eris if she would be okay. Eris said it wouldn't be a problem. Finally, Levin pulled out a document and showed it to Julian, asking what he planned to do now. Both sides kept fighting. From the Elwyn soldiers' side, a woman's voice rang out across the battlefield. Her job was to encourage the soldiers, and she did just that. Arya told them not to be afraid and to keep moving forward. A nobleman watched his soldiers run into battle and thought the scene was exciting. He praised Arya for acting like a true holy knight. He said Cronia's strong castle would soon fall. He believed it must have felt great to lead an army to victory. But Arya didn't agree. She stared blankly at a shaking soldier and said she was only doing her duty. The nobleman called her admirable. Arya held her sword tighter. Her job was to give the soldiers hope and protect the kingdom. With her strength, even the most frightened soldier could become brave. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battlefield, Julian had just signed Levin's document. He felt embarrassed. Levin asked for the paper once Julian finished. Julian couldn't help but curse as he handed it over. He asked if Levin was finally satisfied. Levin confirmed that Julian had officially allowed any plan to stop the enemy, and had also approved Eris's choice to leave the Knight's Order and break off their engagement. Levin said Eris was now free. Eris smiled while reading the paper but said it wasn't time to celebrate yet. She said she would head straight to the castle gates, because Cronia's defenses wouldn't hold much longer unless she could make the Holy Night retreat. Levin thought of Arya after hearing her words. Eris explained that during the last battle, the Silver Demon's plan had pushed her into a corner and used up most of her strength. Because of that, the Dark Knight wouldn't be able to return to the fight, but Eris planned to use that fact and the enemy's overconfidence. Before leaving, she asked Levin to take her father somewhere safe. Eris's father had tried to stop her. He didn't want her to fight anymore after learning that using her power was making her life shorter. Just then, Elel showed up and told him not to worry. Since her father was surprised, Levin explained that Elel was actually Edel, a sacred beast. Eris's father was even more shocked. Edel calmly said that she had the power to absorb corruption, and if she stayed close to Eris, the Dark Knight's curse would be lifted. Eris's father didn't understand at first, so Levin explained it more simply. Eris wouldn't have to shorten her life anymore when using her power. Somehow, her father understood. He walked over to Eris and apologized for all the pain she had gone through. He said it was all his fault. Eris was surprised by what he said and how he acted. Then she turned away and told him that she wouldn't be anyone's puppet again. Whether they could fix their father-daughter relationship or not, that was now up to him. After that, she told Adele it was time to move. As Eris left, her father laughed at himself for acting that way in front of Levin, but Levin shook his head and said they needed to get to safety too. Julian followed them from behind, not sure what else to do. Meanwhile, at the gates of Marley Castle, the Elwyn army kept attacking without stopping. Most of Cronia's soldiers and archers had already been wiped out. The magicians tried to keep the magic barrier strong, but they were running out of energy. They had been using magic non-stop, and it was wearing them out. Just then, the Elwyn forces sent a huge beast to crush the mage squad. The barrier finally broke, and Elwyn's soldiers pushed in harder. Arya felt guilty. The Cronian magicians were starting to give up because no matter what they did, the enemy wouldn't fall. Just when it seemed like all hope was gone, Eris suddenly appeared, riding on Edel. She leaped over the tired and hopeless mages. Everyone was shocked to see her show up out of nowhere. With the barrier gone, the Elwyn army decided to strike all at once to take the fort. At that moment, Eris declared she would not allow it and rode Edel straight into the soldiers. With a single swing of her sword, the Elwyn fighters collapsed as if they had been struck by sudden lightning. When the fallen soldiers lay scattered, both Arya and the Elwyn commander were left in shock. Arya, in particular, wondered why the Dark Knight had returned unharmed and even stronger than before. Eris locked eyes with Arya and gave a confident smile. The commander grew restless and turned on Arya, upset that no one had warned him of a Black Knight's arrival. He demanded that she deal with the threat. Arya stepped forward to face Eris, recalling how she had once spared her. Eris seemed calm and said her long-awaited retirement was finally becoming real, but before it came, she would go on one last rampage. Without hesitation, Eris rushed at Arya. Arya blocked the strike but looked uneasy, while Eris appeared filled with joy. Arya noticed the difference compared to their last fight. Before, she had managed to push Eris to her limits and force her to use her very life force. Now, instead of driving her back, Arya felt as if she was being swallowed whole. Arya reminded herself she could not afford to lose because she had something worth protecting. Yet the moment the word protect crossed her mind, doubt weakened her focus. Eris noticed the hesitation and used it to drive Arya backward. Overpowered, Arya questioned herself, unsure of what she was even trying to protect. From the sky, while riding Elfie, Levin watched the fight between the two girls. He was not mistaken, it really was Arya. He wondered why people were now calling her the Silver Demon. Levin believed Arya would never choose to start a war like this. When Eris saw Arya's troubled face, she told her to call back the Elwyn soldiers. Arya said she could not. Eris then decided she would make Arya retreat even if she had to use force. A pair of shining wings grew from Eris's back. In a blink, her blade appeared before Arya, marking that the battle had ended. She demanded once more that Arya make the Elwyn forces fall back, saying the whole fight would only end if Arya admitted defeat. Arya's voice shook as she answered that it was not yet time. At that moment, another voice called to Arya. It was the summoner Argus flying on his griffin. Behind him came a flock of wyverns. He laughed and shouted, claiming he was late while calling Arya his wife. Hearing this, Arya seemed to calm down a little. Meanwhile, Levin and Elfie quickly recognized Argus and his beast. It was the same griffin that had appeared at the same time as Elfie. But Levin noticed something was wrong. The griffin's eyes glowed red. Right away, he knew danger was near. He asked Elfie for help, for if nothing was done, everyone would be at risk. Argus ordered his summoned beast to scatter the Cronian forces. The griffin followed his command and began striking down the enemy soldiers on the fort walls. The Elwyn troops cheered as they now had the chance to rush into the castle because of Argus. He praised his summoned beast and told it to keep pressing forward. Suddenly, the creature's eyes grew violent and bloodshot. It turned its gaze towards some of the Elwyn soldiers and, for no clear reason, started attacking them as well. Arya, who saw this with confusion, wondered why it was hurting both enemies and allies. The beast then flew close to her, forcing her to confront the dizzy Argus. He explained that the creature had fallen into a trance where it could not tell friend from foe. Argus believed it no longer mattered since the Cronian forces had already been weakened by him. He also reminded her that they had the position and power to treat the soldiers as tools, even expendable ones. Arya was shaken by those words, and the thought of war no longer seemed right to her. The griffin soon lost control again and flew away without waiting for orders. Despite this, Argus and the beast continued to strike at the Cronian troops. The soldiers and mages of Cronia fought as best as they could, yet they were quickly overpowered. Just when it seemed their lives would end as the summoned beast cornered them, Eris appeared and blocked the creature's deadly claws. The soldiers expressed their relief and pulled back as Eris held the beast in place. She urged them to retreat and recover, reminding them that Cronia's strength was not yet broken. Their people were known for their endurance and pride, and she declared they would rise again and again no matter the odds. Inspired by her presence and her call, the Cronian forces found their courage restored, and their spirits rose high. From above, Levin saw that Eris managed to handle the fight on her own. Elfie then explained that she sensed the griffin's life force glowing in a strange way. She said it looked twisted by something unnatural. As the beast lost its reason and attacked its own allies, Levin assumed it had been forced to take some kind of drug. Still, he wondered why such a thing happened to the griffin when it was supposed to be a creature summoned by Argus. Even so, he knew he had to stop its rampage and counted on Elfie for support. She made it clear that if it was for him, she would give her all. At the same time, Argus watched with amazement. He felt certain that victory was on his side. Earlier, Drake had given him medicine meant for the summoned beast. He claimed the mixture had been tested on other creatures. With it, Argus could keep control over the griffin, though it might go wild for a while. Drake encouraged him to prove himself as a true tamer of sacred beasts. Argus looked forward to winning his first battle, but the sight of fallen Elwyn soldiers filled him with disappointment. He ordered Arya to gather the troops and reminded her about the king's command and the duty placed on her. Yet Arya gave no reply and only stared at the ground with lifeless eyes. At that moment, Argus's griffin grew violent. Arya noticed the rampage and locked eyes with the beast. Argus tried to stop his summoned creature, but it had already charged toward Arya with the intent to kill. It no longer listened to his commands. Suddenly, Elfie appeared and tackled the griffin, knocking both Argus and the beast into the air. Arya was left confused as she tried to understand what was happening. Elfie landed on the ground and shifted into her human form, which completely surprised Arya. She declared the attempt a success. Levin gave his thanks, and Arya recognized his voice, causing her to doubt what she had just heard. She listened to the two continue speaking and heard Levin's steps coming closer. When she looked back, she saw Levin reaching out his hand to her. He claimed it had been a while. Arya blushed and felt unsure of what to do or say. She tried to find the right words, but Levin suddenly flicked her forehead, leaving her confused. He sighed and asked her what she was doing, then told her to sit down. He said he had heard many troubling things, such as poisoning the lake and forcing injured soldiers to fight. He heard that she had been going on a rampage. Arya could not think of a reply. She admitted that Levin was the last person she wanted to know about those things. She explained that ever since she joined the Knights, her work had been nothing but jobs like those. Levin understood and apologized. He knew she had been forced into battles she never wished to fight. He admitted he had no reason to blame her. Their reunion as childhood friends was soon interrupted by Argus. He demanded to know what Levin had done to his summoned beast. Arya introduced Levin as another subject of their kingdom, just like them. Argus did not recognize him at first, but after seeing Levin's uneasy expression, he finally remembered. Levin was that failed beast tamer who had been exiled from the kingdom. Arya was shocked and asked what he meant by exile. Argus tried to avoid answering, but Arya pressed further and asked Levin directly if it was true. Levin admitted he had been exiled because of many misunderstandings. Argus kept watching as Elfie appeared and called Levin her mama. Arya was startled to hear that and asked for an explanation. Levin said it would be a long story. Argus cut them off and demanded not to be ignored. He shouted that he did not care about the past of someone useless like Levin and ordered him to stay away from his fiancée. He told Levin to return to his own place. Elfie suddenly became angry and ordered Argus not to continue. Argus questioned her words, but Elfie firmly warned him not to disturb her mother. She swung her dragon tail and sent Argus flying. She declared that her mother was in the middle of an important talk. When Arya saw both human and dragon traits in Elfie, she believed that Elfie belonged to the legendary dragon clan. Levin then confirmed that Elfie was his partner, which left Arya amazed. Right after, Levin urged Arya to bring the fight to an end. He explained that the griffin was raging because of drugs, and if it kept going, the entire battlefield would be placed in danger. He insisted they had to stop the beast and asked her to call the soldiers back. But Arya answered that she could not do it since it was the command of the king. She said she was unable to go against the king's orders. Levin pressed her, asking what she truly meant by that. At that instant, Elfie noticed the wild griffin charging toward them. Levin was shocked that it had already regained its strength. Elfie quickly told both Levin and Arya to stay behind her. The griffin rushed forward at a speed like a flying bullet. Levin found himself unable to react, yet nothing happened. The griffin halted right in front of him. Arya grew worried that Levin might be struck, but Elfie stopped her from moving for an unknown reason. The griffin spoke up, saying they had finally met. It called Levin its mama with tears in its eyes, leaving him confused. The griffin wrapped its wings around Levin while crying and kept calling him its mama. Levin said he was not its mama, but the griffin refused to accept it. It cried that it had been searching for him all this time. The griffin could not stop its tears because it had finally found its true master. Levin thought about what this meant, and remembered the holy beast summoning ritual of beast tamers. During that ritual, 2 eggs had appeared, one belonging to Elfie and chosen for Levin, while the other was thought to belong to Argus. But the griffin explained that it was only a coincidence that the egg had appeared before Argus. Both eggs had been summoned by Levin alone. Levin realized the problem he was caught in. Argus was never the griffin's master. This explained why the kingdom had forced the beast to attack by giving it drugs. Still, Levin cared more about how the kingdom had treated the griffin all this time. He knew how the king viewed summoned beasts only as tools. Since the griffin refused to follow their orders, they forced it with drugs instead. Even in that suffering, the griffin had been looking for its true master. Levin finally embraced the griffin and apologized for being late and for letting it feel lonely. He told it that things would be fine now because he would take care of it. Elfie looked relieved. The griffin shook and cried louder, unable to hold back its emotions. But Levin realized it was not only about the griffin. He was angry that everyone was being used for the kingdom's gain. The battles were driven by the king's selfish desires, and Levin wondered if it was truly worth serving such a kingdom. Arya had no answer. She wanted to speak her thoughts but stopped. At that moment, Levin asked her to join them. Arya quietly looked at his hands. Levin was inviting Arya to leave the kingdom and live with him. She thought about being with him and reached out to take his hand. But her mind suddenly remembered something troubling and she pulled her hand away. She believed that if they both left the country, something bad could happen to their home, Lumiere village. She feared the kingdom might cut off support to the village or even strike back against it, and she did not want to imagine that happening. Levin felt sorry and blamed himself for being in exile. Arya did not agree because she knew he had not done anything wrong. She thought it would be better to try speaking with the kingdom again to fix the misunderstanding, but Levin told her that it was no longer possible. Then he called for Lindworm and the whole place became covered in shade. Arya looked up and saw a giant dragon flying above. Levin explained that Lindworm was another holy beast he had formed a pact with, and right now his home stood on the dragon's back. It was not truly a house yet since it was only scattered rubble, but he and Elfie were slowly rebuilding it. Arya was stunned to learn he was living on a dragon's back. Levin told her that this was where he belonged now. She noticed the sadness on his face and felt heartbroken, but he made it clear that it did not mean he had abandoned their village. His dream was to move Lumiere village onto Lindworm's back. Hearing this gave Arya new hope. Levin explained that the soil on Lindworm was soft, the water was clean, and most importantly, the land did not belong to any kingdom. Even without protection from rulers, they could still build their own future there. Arya had never thought of living with everyone in that way. Still, she could not easily accept his invitation since as a knight and commander, she had a duty in the war. That was when Levin suggested ending the war. Meanwhile, inside Cronia's gold mine, the miners worked without pause while Julian shouted at them to dig faster. He was upset that the gold gathered was still far from enough. At that moment, Levin and his group arrived. They noticed how many miners were working in the tunnels, and Levin turned his attention to Julian. He could clearly see Julian's desperation. Levin already knew from Eris that the true reason behind the conflict between the two nations was this very mine. Elwyn's main goal was to seize Cronia's source of gold. If Cronia lost the war, the mine would fall into Elwyn's hands. Levin suspected Julian planned to drain the mine of gold as quickly as possible and use it to fund his escape. Julian tried to deny this, but the miners overheard and stopped their work. They began questioning him with anger, claiming it was the first time they learned Cronia was close to losing. They could not believe their lives were at risk without their knowledge. Julian shouted back, demanding they stay quiet and continue digging. The miners then remembered that Julian was supposed to be commander of the Border Knights, yet he was hiding in the mines. They argued that he should have been on the battlefield. Julian warned them to hold their tongues and insulted them as useless. He turned his rage toward Levin and demanded to know where Eris was, blaming him if Cronia ended up defeated. Levin realized the truth of the situation. He thought that if Cronia won, Elwyn would eventually attack again, and if Cronia lost, the mine would be gone anyway. Either path led to an endless cycle of war. To end it, Levin suggested destroying the mine itself. For a moment, everyone was struck silent until Julian furiously called him insane. He said Levin had no right to decide such a thing. Levin reminded him about the contract they had signed. The agreement allowed any action necessary to stop the invasion Julian had completely forgotten. Levin then ordered the miners to evacuate, announcing the mine would be sealed. Without hesitation, the miners obeyed and left, feeling free for the first time. Julian begged them to stay, knowing his life would be ruined if the mine was lost. The miners, however, expressed their relief and admitted they were glad to finally be free from his control. Levin understood their feelings. He invited them to check a quarry near his home, telling them skilled workers like them would be welcome. The miners grew excited and asked where it was. Levin jokingly said it was located on the back of a dragon, and the miners laughed at his words. Afterward, Levin asked Elfie to set up a barrier near the mine just in case, since he wanted to lessen the blast. Arya grew worried and asked if he was really sure about destroying a gold mine. Levin was certain. All he wished was for her to be safe and happy. To him, this was the least he could do. Arya blushed at his words and warned him not to say things like that so easily. Yet Levin remained unaware of her feelings. Everyone then rose into the skies. As usual, Levin rode on Elfie's back while Arya took her place on the griffin. A signal flare shot upward. Seeing this, Levin gave the order for Lindworm to attack. The massive dragon assured him that he would handle it. Lindworm faced the gold mine, opened his mouth, and gathered a blazing force. The skies began to darken, and soldiers below wondered what was happening. Julian trembled at the sight of the dragon and begged for it to stop. Still, Lindworm released his dragon breath, striking the gold mine directly. From afar, Elwyn soldiers watched in shock. Some mages quickly warned other units and reported that the gold mine had been destroyed by a dragon's breath. Many of them could not believe Cronia possessed such a weapon. In the end, the Elwyn forces fell back. At last, Eris and the Cronian soldiers could breathe again. Even so, they were troubled by the sudden presence of a dragon, and Eris worried about Levin's safety. Meanwhile, Elfie informed Levin that the Elwyn troops had retreated. Levin felt relieved that everything worked out. With this, both Arya and Eris were freed from the fight. He turned to Arya and said it was finally time to decide. He wanted to hear her answer. Arya admitted she kept thinking how wonderful it would be to go with him. She thanked him for the invitation but explained again that she could not join him because she was still a holy knight. As long as the cursed dagger remained, she could not go anywhere else. She apologized for not sharing everything sooner. Levin grew confused and asked what she truly meant. At that moment, Drake appeared with laughter. He said Arya was busy enough with her duty as a holy knight. Without warning, he swung his sword toward the startled Levin. Levin tried to look back, checking who had appeared behind him. Elfie warned him just as a sword came swinging toward him. She blocked the strike in time with her transformed hand and then shoved the intruder away in anger. Drake laughed, finding amusement in the clash. He had not expected to witness something this strange on the battlefield, and he thought it was worth his trip. He could hardly believe that an insect flying around the field had turned out to be the true form of a legendary dragon lord. At last, he had a story exciting enough to share with others. Drake made it clear that he had not come for Levin or Elfie. Instead, he walked straight to Arya and held her hand, saying he came to take her. Arya trembled with fear as she wondered why he was there in such a dangerous place. Drake simply asked why she was not glad to see someone from her own side. Levin then remembered that Drake belonged to the Langren ducal house, the oldest noble family in Elwyn. Drake, the young heir, was known as a skilled knight. He had not fought in the front lines earlier, but he had shown up for Arya's sake. Levin, however, did not care about his rank or name. He refused to let him take her away and was ready to send him back on his own. Drake laughed and said he did not care who Levin was, but he found his request unreasonable. He said nothing could be done about it. Then Drake pulled out a dagger and showed it. Arya trembled when she saw it, and Levin could not understand what was happening. The dagger was the Holy Knight's Dagger of Loyalty, a rare item used for rituals, which meant it had no power to kill. Drake mocked it and said even the goddess seemed to have poor taste. He also realized Levin had no knowledge of the dagger, which made him laugh even more at the strange situation. The dagger was said to carry the price of a holy knight's power. If a knight betrayed the one to whom the dagger was given, not only would the knight lose all of that power, but the person they cared about most would also vanish. It was a curse disguised as a divine calling, forcing loyalty by assuming betrayal from the start. Drake found this rule both suspicious and amusing. Levin then remembered Arya's earlier words that she would not leave as long as the dagger stayed in the kingdom. His thoughts grew heavier with questions, but before he could think more, Drake promised to take Arya in his place. Rage filled Levin, and he struck with a punch, but Drake easily avoided it and swung his sword in return. Elfie arrived just in time to save Levin from the attack. Drake then pulled Arya close and walked away, saying they had their own matters to handle. Watching them leave, Levin realized that saving Arya had been impossible from the very beginning. On the ground, only her ribbon remained. Even so, he swore with all his strength that he would save her no matter what. Later in the Elwyn kingdom, the king fell into a fit of rage. He demanded to know what was happening and could not believe the gold mine had vanished so suddenly. Drake confirmed that the mine was truly gone and that their army had suffered a crushing defeat this time. He also urged the restrained Argus to explain everything while blaming him for failure. With a trembling voice, Argus revealed that a dragon had appeared and destroyed the mine with its fiery breath. The king doubted this since he believed such dragons should not exist anymore. He also demanded to know what happened to the griffin and why it had not returned with Argus. Argus then shouted that Levin had stolen his summoned beast. The king grew confused, trying to recall who Levin was. Argus explained that it was the so-called beast tamer who once summoned only a lizard egg during the ritual. Drake mockingly questioned who the real failure was in that moment. The king then remembered Levin as the same man who once defied him and asked if it was true that he had stolen the griffin. Argus admitted it and added that for some reason the griffin no longer obeyed his words. Enraged, the king hurled his wineglass at Argus and accused him of lying. He refused to believe that someone so weak could not even control his own summoned beast. Drake had finally lost his patience and urged everyone to stop the farce. He said the king and his judgment at that time had actually been wrong. He explained that Levin's summoned beast had not been a lizard at all. Drake revealed it had been a dragon lord. He told how Levin had brought forth a small white dragon and also the massive dragon that had destroyed the gold mine during the battle. He believed the so-called lizard had actually been the small white dragon. The king could not accept this, thinking Drake's words were nonsense. At that time, there had been no reports of any dragon. Suddenly, someone called for them to listen to the chief of the beast tamers, Gideon. The prince declared that the chief now knew everything. The king grew confused when Prince Rex appeared. Gideon felt unsure, but Rex commanded him to reveal the truth he had discovered from the old archives and to admit the mistakes they had made. The king asked what mistake they were speaking about and told them to explain it. Rex pushed the nervous Gideon to share the contents of the book they had discovered. Gideon hesitated and said it was an old book with no real proof since nobody even knew the author. He thought it was not worth troubling the king with something so minor. Drake took the book, opened it, and read a passage aloud. The writer explained that he was leaving behind a record until the day when the divine dragon would return. The passage said a gifted holy knight would gain 2 companions. The first would be a sacred beast, the true partner. The second would be a royal from the divine dragon clan. The text claimed no one knew when they would appear, but when they did, the divine dragon would surely bring great blessings to the kingdom. Everyone listened closely as Drake continued. The king grew uneasy and asked what had just been said. Drake showed the illustration of the dragon. It showed the dragon's young form, the same small lizard that had just been exiled. Drake remarked on how small it looked and admitted he never expected a divine dragon to start in such a tiny form. He said it even seemed familiar to him. The king grew angry, told him not to mock him, and grabbed the book. He refused to believe that the little lizard could be a divine dragon. He threw the book on the floor as if it were worthless, and shouted that it was nothing more than a lizard. Drake only sighed. Rex then explained that the egg Levin had summoned, the one that hatched into that small lizard, was truly a member of the divine dragon clan. The entire room fell silent at this revelation. Rex also said that Levin was now the master of the divine dragon clan, and he believed Levin was also the true master of the griffin. Argus shouted that this could not be possible since the egg had appeared right in front of him. Rex reminded Argus that a beast tamer was like a parent. Still, the griffin never listened to Argus and refused to obey from the very start. Rex said this was the reason he could only conclude that Argus was not truly the griffin's master. He pointed out that Argus was unable to command the beast at all. Argus could not deny it, yet he continued to believe the griffin belonged to him. Drake leaned closer and told him in a mocking way that it was wrong to take what belonged to others. Argus reached the end of his patience and struggled to deny everything. The king smashed another object and shouted in anger, asking the others if they understood the mistake they had made. He turned to Gideon and asked if he remembered what he had said before, that Levin's summoned beast was nothing more than a lizard. Gideon tried to argue that the book's information was wrong, but the king struck him with his cane. He could not accept that Gideon, who called himself the chief beast tamer, failed to see the difference between a lizard and a divine dragon. He called Gideon a useless fool. Gideon begged for forgiveness, yet the king kept striking him and blamed him for letting a divine dragon slip from their control. Rex finally chose to step in and stop his father. The king then turned his glare toward Argus. He called him worthless for failing to gain a sacred beast and even letting the golden opportunity escape. He cursed him as useless trash. Rex asked his father to stop and added that his father's poor judgment was to blame from the start. By trusting Gideon's words so easily, he had cast Levin aside. Rex could not believe his father still refused to take responsibility for his own mistake. The king once again thought about Levin. A sudden idea came to him, and he quickly ordered his son to leave and bring Levin back at once. Rex could not believe what he heard. The king insisted that the problem would be cleared once Levin returned. Rex questioned if his father truly believed that someone who had suffered from violence and abuse would ever come back to serve the kingdom. He declared that Levin would never return. The king became furious and demanded silence. He commanded that Levin be dragged back by force. He also ordered Levin's townsfolk to be taken as hostages, reminding everyone that Levin was the one who had destroyed the gold mine and harmed the kingdom's wealth. Rex was stunned by the words of his own father. He pointed out that Levin's hometown was part of their kingdom's borders and asked if his father truly wanted to oppress their own people. The king showed no care. He declared that even his own son would face no mercy if he went against his will. He then ordered Rex to leave at once. Meanwhile, on Lindworm's back, Levin sat in front of a campfire with a troubled look while holding Arya's ribbon tightly. Eris appeared and brought him some hot chocolate. She had learned from Elfie that the Holy Knight's name was Arya, and she was surprised that Levin was once childhood friends with the person who now stood as his enemy on the battlefield. Levin thought back to the past and remembered how Arya lost her parents at a young age. His family had taken her in, and they grew up together. When both of them turned 16, they each received S-ranked divine blessings. Their entire village celebrated as if it were a festival. Even after Levin was exiled, the village continued to receive help from the kingdom because of Arya, who had become a holy knight. Now Levin had just discovered that she was being forced to obey against her will because of the dagger of loyalty. Still, Arya was doing everything she could to protect the village on her own. Eris listened with concern. She recalled how during their second battle she had heard Arya's true voice begging to be saved. Arya had been struggling the whole time, following orders while suffering deep inside. Eris felt that pain clearly because she had endured the same kind of torment before. She believed they could rescue Arya and bring her back. Levin's eyes showed determination as he rose to his feet. He decided they would head to Lumiere village at dawn. He remembered that one knight already knew about his destruction of the gold mine, and he was certain that if the king truly held a grudge, the kingdom would take revenge. If they failed to find Levin, their next target would be the village itself. Eris grew worried, but Levin assured himself that there was a way forward. He carried a plan that only he could use, and in his heart he swore to protect Lumiere village and keep Arya safe no matter what. That is the end of the recap at Chapter 18. Please read the pinned comment about the next part.